Said goodbye to him. Well, Mr. Tshilane is still here from the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa. He's the executive chair there. And what we want to look at now, and we'll speak to some graphics that we're going to show on the screen, is the race for seats. The entire week we've been talking about the race for votes when we were looking at a comparison as to how many people registered and how many people actually voted. And now we're looking at the actuals, what has actually come in and what it implies. Our senior reporter who's at the Tshwane National Results Operations Center said earlier that it looks like there might be 12 parties going into the National Assembly. Mr. Tshilane, come in once again, help us out here. Here is what we look at, a race for seats, 400 seats in the National Assembly. And based on the outcomes that we've seen coming out today, what sort of predictions can we talk about? The ANC has already garnered 10,020,490 votes, giving them 57.50% of the vote. The DA 3 million, the EFF 1 million, and the IFP, Freedom Front Plus, ACDP, UDM coming at the bottom. What sort of race, what sort of seat allocation are we looking at?
Well, as you correctly have indicated here, this is a prediction based on the model that was developed by CSIR. Mm-hmm. And then the seats are reflected as follows. But I think it is important for me to emphasize this. Remember that there is a process that is still going on.
Yes.
That particular process deals with the issue of the objections. So the results... But
also the prediction is based on registered voters, not people who've actually voted. So we're comparing with what was predicted and what we have at hand right now.
No. It is taking into consideration now almost the numbers as they stand. It does not talk about what will happen once the Commission has declared the results, but it is likely to be the same. Remember, even before we arrive at the seats, we dealt with the issue of the race for votes, which is where we were looking at which political party is getting what percentage.
Absolutely.
Now, immediately after that, now you've got to convert that into seats using the formula
allocation in National Assembly and allocation at provincial legislatures.
Absolutely.
So as we look at it now, the ANC could be getting 230 seats, the DA 83 seats, the EFF 42, IFP 14, the Freedom Front Plus 10, and the rest of the seats to the rest of the parties, including the ATM, as Mzwambeje was saying earlier on, that the ATM could be going in as well. What sort of variation or deviation do you see coming up based on what you just mentioned, the process that's currently underway?
Essentially what you have there is that the biggest beneficiaries in these elections are from number 3 downwards. In other words, EFF is the biggest beneficiary, IFP and Freedom Front Plus.
Yeah. As we go to KZN, I'd like my producers to please bring up the KZN graphic and we go through to Ayanda Mhlongo in KwaZulu-Natal. Ayanda, we're busy trying to determine the seat allocation, as they call it, the race for seats. What is it looking like in KZN?
Yeah, thanks very much, Desiree. Good morning to you and our viewers once again. Desiree, in terms of the seat allocation here in KwaZulu-Natal, it is going to be, once the IEC in just a few minutes' time, I don't know if you can see behind us, all the political parties have arrived here today for the all-important declaration by the IEC. We see the IEC officials as well in KwaZulu-Natal. They have also arrived here, and once they're done with the declaration of the results, they will then announce the seat allocation for the 80 seats in the provincial legislature here in KwaZulu-Natal. But of course, looking at the results, the fact that the African National Congress is in the lead with 54.22% of the votes, we can already determine that the ANC will get the majority of the seats in parliament, followed by the IFP, then the Democratic Alliance and the EFF. And we're still waiting to find out in terms of the numbers that one party requires to get an actual seat, whether or not the National Freedom Party will be able to get at least one seat. Desiree, we did earlier on speak about the fact that there were still some voting stations where a recount had to be done, and that dropped the results again to 99.92. I'm just getting an indication now from my colleague Ishmael that the counting has been concluded and we're back at 100% of the results that have been concluded here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But just to speak about the African National Congress and its performance in this election, I'm joined by the Deputy Chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Mike Mabiakulu. Mr. Mabiakulu, thank you very much, Deputy Chair, for your time this morning. Just to first get reaction from the ANC on your performance.
Well, as the ANC, first and foremost, we are highly humbled to the people of KwaZulu-Natal for actually coming out, listening to our message, and for once again entrusting us with their vote. And the very fact that we recognize the fact that what we have achieved in this election is coming from the backdrop of some challenges that we have had as an organization between the period of 2015 up to last year. And indeed, we in earnest started campaigning seriously in October last year. And indeed, it is a very big achievement for us. We have been able to achieve 54%.
But looking at the statistics, and I have my pages here, 2014 you came in at 64.52. Now you've almost dropped exactly 10%. So surely you can't be too happy about that.
I think we should accept that some of the challenges that we've had, which are challenges relating to some of the performance in some of our municipalities, which in some instances we have seen some service delivery protests that have taken place. But you also know that, for instance, in eThekwini, we had a challenge that on the eve of an election, we had one of the strikes that actually affected us. On top of that, we had the disasters. All of these things have actually counted in the number of people who have gone out to vote. And indeed, we will do our own detailed analysis post this election. But our gut feeling at the moment tells us that the majority of people who have voted the ANC have not taken their vote to other parties, but instead they may have actually not come out to vote for the ANC. And I think it's something that we'll work on as a movement, and we'll address it.
Speaking of the issues at eThekwini, they may have arisen very close to the election, and I know you're scrambling as leaders to try and resolve that matter before, because they literally happened on the eve of the election, Mr. Mabiakulu. But in certain areas, I want to go to Ukahlamba, for example, which is one of the areas that had the IEC, a bit concerned, the police as well, the protests that took place there, the issues that the community there raised. That is your stronghold. We understand people there are in support of the ANC, but this time decided that they were not going to vote at all. The issues they were saying are not new. How did it get to that situation that you did not resolve these issues in these respective areas, knowing that you were heading for an election?
Well, we must say that when you are actually approaching an election, you will have communities who are raising genuine issues coming forward and utilizing the very reason that you're actually approaching an election, right, to apply pressure, which is, we must accept it will always happen. But on the same token, you also have got people who are opportunists, who also take an advantage of a looming election to raise some of the issues. Our own view is that where there have been genuine issues raised, we were able to have a rapid response teams that were able to intervene to deal with those issues. In the issue of Ukahlamba, for instance, our own understanding is that there were people who deliberately wanted to prevent people from campaigning there. So it wasn't as if people had raised the matter on time for us to respond to it. And we think some people may have decided deliberately that we are going to manufacture that on the eve of an election to try and block people. But where I am saying earlier on that it's an issue we needed to be able to address, because in eThekwini, for instance, we have been looking at our numbers. We think if we were able to have got some of the ANC supporters in eThekwini to go out and vote, we would have been actually in a much more better position. But it's an issue that we are going to be doing a detailed analysis post-mortem, post this election. And over and above that, as the ANC, we are still very grateful to the people of KwaZulu-Natal for entrusting us with their vote.
Speaking about the people entrusting you now, moving forward now, what do you think the ANC needs to do? There's growing discontent in the communities. You've got members of the ANC in certain instances, Mr. Mabiakulu, where there are leaders that have been found wanting. You know, there have been arrests of some of your leaders in relation to the political killings. What is the step? You've had mayors, you're having to recall some mayors because of dissatisfaction from the community. What does this vote mean to you now moving forward? What do you think the ANC needs to do to get back on track?
Well, it is very clear to us what this vote means. Number one is that we have a very coherent plan. And because we have been in government for the last 15 years in KwaZulu-Natal, we will actually hit the ground running. The team that we are going to be sending to government, that is going to be actually driving government, they know where the weaknesses are, and we will ensure that we have got the best collective that we send into government, and that best collective will be able to respond to these very issues. When it comes to municipalities, we will actually be interested in dealing with all of the issues that are coming out of municipalities. As an ANC, already we have begun with our rapid response team to intervene in those municipalities. In the case of Msunduzi, you know what we have done, and some other municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal. So as an ANC, we already are not just waiting for these elections. We have started to intervene in the most responsive manner in the various areas in KwaZulu-Natal.
And I suppose we're not going to hear just yet who is likely to make up the cabinet and who's likely to become premier.
Well, those matters will be discussed by the ANC. We're not there yet.
Mr. Mabiakulu, thank you so much, sir, for your time. And I know you need to go down and join your members of the party as you await the declaration of the results. Thank you, sir, for your time. Mr. Mike Mabiakulu, they're sharing, of course, with the ANC. Although they've managed to again receive 54.22% of the votes, and so they'll continue as the ruling party here in KwaZulu-Natal, but having dropped at least by 10% if you look at their results in 2014, where they had 64.52% of the votes. It is getting a little bit rowdy as, of course, the declaration of the results is about to start. I'm going to hold it here for now, Desiree, just so we can set ourselves in preparation for the results, that declaration which is going to happen in just a few minutes from now. So for now, Desiree, just very quickly, let's take things back to you.
And thank you there to Ayanda Mhlongo. Of course, we will cover that declaration live for you as soon as it happens. But we continue to take a look at KwaZulu-Natal, one of the only province actually where the succession in terms of the leader board is first the ANC, the IFP, and then the DA. Again, another prediction here, and I'm going to bring in Mr. Terry Tsilani looking at the seat allocation in that province. Ayanda was telling us there later that there's about 80 seats being contested. There are 83 seats being contested. Mr. Tsilani, your thoughts on this graphic?
Perhaps before we deal with the graphic, there is an issue that I just wanted to raise in relation to the declaration of the results.
Yes.
What is happening in the provinces is not a declaration of the results. The results, it's a legal requirement for the results to be declared by the Commission.
At a national level.
They will be declared by the Commission in terms of Section 57. So what is currently happening is basically people just announcing figures as they see them.
Okay. So part of the process.
Yeah.
It's not a conclusion.
No, it is not conclusion. It is not a declaration of the results.
Yes.
It is just an announcement of the results.
That this is where we
appear.
are as based on what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as I suggested to you earlier on, the Commission is busy now dealing with Section 55 objections, and it is only later on or at the time when they have dealt with the Section 55 objections that they can actually declare the results.
In fact, what you're bringing up is very important, because Ayanda was saying just now that the province is now at 100% calculated, and the system is still showing 99.98. So it's important to make
it's a very important factor, because if in the objections that the Commission is dealing with, they sustain certain objections, the results could still change depending on what they discover during the investigation of the objections that have been raised.
You said something earlier about the Commission having 7 days to declare the result. At what point is it conclusive?
When the Commission has now dealt with all Section 55 objections and it feels satisfied that there is no other irregularity that they've got to deal with, it is then that they can declare the results.
All right, let's go back to this graphic that's showing us a prediction of the ANC getting 44 provincial seats, IFP 14, the DA and the EFF. What sort of influence can the IFP exert on this 14 seats that, with these 14 seats that they can bring in?
Look, I mean, it's a major achievement for the IFP, because remember, the DA was the official opposition previously. And the fact that they've performed to this extent, I think it's a major achievement for them, and something that they need to be commended for.
And in terms of the economic freedom fighters, will 8 seats give them sufficient influence?
You know, the beauty about the proportional representation system, and I know that there are quite a number of criticisms that have been raised
about changing
a proportional representation system, but it does give every party, no matter how small it is, a voice. Now, what you have there, it's also an indication that all these political parties, because they have a seat, they will still be able to reflect the interest of their voters by participating in the debates, by helping in terms of the development of the legislation, etc., etc.
When you are the NFP of Zanele Gamagwaza Msibi and you have managed to secure a seat, and yet all indications are that the people, the crowd that moved from the IFP to the MFP have now clearly moved back to the IFP. What will you make? All right, we're going to have to hold a thought to that response. We have to go to KZN. Apparently the live declaration is being made. Let's go there live.
Commissioner of the South African Police Services, observers, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to the announcement of the preliminary results of the 6th general election. As I said when we first came here last week on Thursday, I said this was the election of firsts. It is in so many ways a history-making election. For example, it took place on the 8th of May, the day when the interim constitution was adopted on the 6th of May, 1996. The constitution which